distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Today, we converge in person after 2 long years, challenging years for that matter, for many across the entire continent and the world. But as this often tells us, every adversity carries with it the seeds of equal or greater benefit. The challenges that kept us apart, together with new ones, present an opportunity to draw the best out of all of us. On behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, we thank the government and the people of Senegal for their leadership in conveying us to this beautiful city of Dakar for the 18th AMSON session. This 18th AMSON session, the theme, securing people's well-being and ensuring environmental sustainability in Africa, could not have been more timely. As we gather here today, Africa remains a very delicate state, with rising food and fuel prices fomenting the unprecedented socio-economic pressures of the COVID-19 emergency, which we are only starting to recover. The cumulative effect has seen the continent's inflation skyrocketing to 12.2%, the highest since 2008. Consequently, good people and the environment have borne the brunt. For example, the fuel crisis has pushed countries to the brink of considering unsustainable alternatives that are costly to the environment. Households across Africa, increased domestic energy costs have seen many falling back to dirty fuels, coal and tar, increasing the pressure on forests. Cumulatively, this desperate situation is a disruption of investments on the critical environmental front. Africa cannot afford such disruptions. Distinguished delegates, Africa here today, the challenges, environmental challenges, are visible across the continent, from climate change as projected by the IPCC's 6th assessment report. Noted that even if warming were to be kept below 1.5 degrees, up to 8% of today's farmland will become climatically unsuitable, causing up to 1 million children from Africa to suffer stunting. Furthermore, the rate of storms in Africa has quadrupled. Flooding seen across countries has increased by nearly tenfold, costing the continent between 10 billion to 9% of GDP in destroyed infrastructure. As if that is not enough, Africa is beset by plastic pollution, where 19 million tons of plastic waste are generated every year, and up to 17 million tons are mismanaged. Under business as usual, this scenario is projected to triple by 2060. Open burning accounts for up to 29% of fine particulate pollution of Africa's air, and together with other air pollutants leads to 1.2 million premature deaths each and every year. On top of these, the continent's soils are highly threatened. In parts of Africa, to speak today, over $3.8 billion is lost yearly to erosion, flooding, and pollution. Other estimates show that up to 80% of the continent's cultivated soil are degraded, resulting in the loss of up to 60 kilograms of nutrients per hectare. In addition to all these distinguished delegates, there is a silent creeping killer called antimicrobial resistance. Where parts of Africa have the highest incidence of antimicrobial resistant deaths globally at 24 per 100,000 people. And if this trend continues, up to 4.1 million people in the continent will die annually from antimicrobial resistance in the next 27 years. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, just as he who earns calamity eats into his own family, the environmental sector finds itself in a difficult spot of addressing environmental and socio-economic challenges together, considering the intricate relations between them. With a rich agenda, this 18th AMSON session provides us with a spectacular opportunity to bring forth the environmental dimension of solutions to these challenges by addressing open burning of waste to plastic pollution, to fostering sustainable soil governance, improving ocean governance, enhancing our understanding of actions against antimicrobial resistance, and reducing air pollution, this AMSN session is well fortified for environmental solutions. For example, when we're talking soil governance, addressing the inefficient use of soils and ecological resources in key dependent sectors such as agriculture will contribute to protecting our soils. Young people to retool their skills and engage in circularity, such as recycling plastic waste into various valuable products, will provide opportunities and create up to 8 billion recycling opportunities in Africa. In addressing open burning of waste, investing in waste to electricity, and reduce over 90% of the initial volume of waste in African cities that are urbanizing at a faster rate and could create up to 20 million jobs. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this 18th AMSN session also complements critical action areas of Africa Green Stimulus Program, a framework that AMSN adopted to support implementation of environmental and sustainable development initiatives in Africa as we build back better and different. At the operational level, to enhance the implementation of critical AMSN decisions and initiatives, as called for by the 17th session in Durban in 2019, this gathering will look at the role of the environmental protection agencies and Directorate of the Environment in Africa, and how to enhance as well as strengthen collaboration between AMSN and Ministries of Finance and Economic Planning. Most importantly, distinguished delegates, what we do here today will be critical to solidifying Africa's centric positions in upcoming international processes, including COP27 on climate change, the resumed 15th session of the Biodiversity COP, and the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee that will forge a global agreement on plastic pollution. As we get to work, distinguished delegates, let us remember this African proverb that those who accomplish great things pay attention to little ones. Every action you will take matters. Yes, it will matter because the tears being shed by our mothers, our brothers and sisters, our fathers across the continent are a reminder of the urgency for workable solutions. I thank you.
The report provides information with regard to the status of implementation of the decisions that were adopted by AMSN at the 17th session, which took place in Durban in 2019. It also highlights implementation of the outcomes of the 8th special session that took place in December 2020. We also have the 9th special session that took place early February 2022, as well as the first part of the 18th session of AMSN that took place in September last year. Now, in summary, the report provides highlights of some of the key activities and the associated outcomes. But of course, it should not be considered in any way to be exhaustive in terms of the activities that may have been undertaken, particularly with some of our partners. It does also provide a summary of some of the key meetings that took place, particularly the Bureau. There are a number of Bureau meetings that took place. Other related meetings related to the Bamako Convention that took place over the period. It does also 2022, including the adoption of the African Green Stimulus Program that we'll be reporting on a little later today. So as I said, this report is available to all the delegates in both English and French. It was emailed to all delegates and it's also available online on the ANSEN website. So with that, I think I would leave it there for delegates to get some time to go through the report. Of course, as Secretariat, we are available here throughout the week in case there are some clarifications that delegates would want to have with regard to the report. Will be available to provide that clarification. So basically, this report is for noting by this particular esteemed meeting, and I would like to submit, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
We'll discuss in depth the documents. So if this is the case, so please I urge and I call for our colleagues to keep our interventions in very important clarifications or highlights. And if this is the case also, so you've mentioned that we are going to discuss those documents in depth tomorrow, but we don't have an idea about tomorrow's agenda. It's not clear for us. We don't have access to tomorrow's agenda and the breakout groups, as you've mentioned. Also, the website, the designated website, also doesn't have all the documents. For instance, the document for fostering soil health and biodiversity is not there. So we need to know more about tomorrow's agenda to organize ourselves. And also, it's another suggestion, which is to make use of this big screen. I think it will help us if you have, we can display the documents that we are discussing. So I want to stress and to clarify more if I got your correct in the issue that we are going to discuss all these issues or all these documents in depth tomorrow, so that we can save the time for today's session to tomorrow. And how can we get access to tomorrow's detailed agenda to organize ourselves? And of course, last issue is that the website, doesn't include all the documents, and they give an example of the document that is talking about fostering soil health or soil biodiversity. It's fostering soil governance in Africa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In our waste management in Africa, infrastructure based on an integrated waste management principle that promote waste resources and circularity as keys to address these challenges are, and as well as unlocking the African waste, the opportunity in Africa on waste management and waste sector. The initiative on waste burning and momentum in Africa that is led by UNHCR that aims at phasing out open waste burning, and the waste initiative 50 by 2050 that is led by, to be launched in COP27, led by the government of Egypt's Minister of Environment, has the goal to treat and recycle 50% of waste by 2050, which are aimed to creating implementation mechanisms via a multi-stakeholder partnership with all African countries. 50 by 2050 is to be the first waste initiative for Africa in COP. Actually, it is the first waste initiative in COP ever. We are glad that this is going to be meeting all the root causes of the challenges of waste management at the level of the African continent, not just cities and not just a specific type of waste. It will be targeting all waste types and all the African cities, all the African continent. The COP27 Waste Initiative will be launched on day 17 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Africa, and we are happy to discuss more of that while you are with us. It will be addressing both mitigation and adaptation very happy to discuss more and present more scientific base and information on this initiative. Thank you so much, Alison, for the leadership and the opportunity to present this presentation today and tomorrow. We look for your support and we look forward to working with all the African countries. And hopefully, we'll see all of you during the launching in COP27 for 50 by 2050. Thank you so much.
Document number is Amazon 18/2/9. And what this document looks at, distinguished delegates, is it put in perspective antimicrobial resistance within the environment lens, and it defines antimicrobial resistance as a condition of drug resistance where a serious infection disease refuses to respond to antibiotics. And when you look at the context of Africa today, Africa holds an enviable position of having the highest incidence of antimicrobial resistant deaths. And it is projected that in 28 years from today, 4.1 million people in the continent will die yearly from this antimicrobial resistance. And therefore, it is very, very important to be able to look at ways in which the role of the environment in this issue of antimicrobial resistance can actually become the center stage, because the environment acts as a reservoir of resistant pathogens and parasites. For example, humans and animals through contaminated food, through poor hygiene, through poor sanitation, results in these pathogens crossing from one to another. So the interaction of chemicals and biological pollutants from various sources, including health facilities or municipal waste or runoff of waste and chemicals from animals and crop production or pharmaceutical waste and other sources of our shared environment, creates a breeding ground for this antimicrobial resistance. These chemicals and biological pollutants catalyze the incubation growth as well as spread of resistant microbes into waters, into our soils, into plants, thus creating this reservoir. So the environment is very, very important in reversing this dangerous antimicrobial resistant phenomenon that we face with. So in this paper, distinguished delegates, it details what can actually be showcased with the interaction of these parasites and pathogens and the kind of actions that can actually be taken to reverse these phenomena. And so the big question that this paper answers is, how do we address this from an environmental lens? And the paper attempts to provide the first approach, controlling the inputs into the environment, which in this case are the contaminants, specifically by addressing pollution. And the second is addressing the aspects of climate change that actually weakens the very system that could actually be able to protect humans from actually being exposed to this phenomenon. A system that this paper encapsulates, it does it in two words. One, health, where human, animals, and environmental health is tackled as one. And the One Health approach is therefore very, very critical. The paper also identifies aspects that needs to inform science-based decision making, for example, like strengthening intersectional coherence, as well as improving reporting, surveillance, and monitoring, and prioritizing more research to be able to further understand this phenomenon that is becoming a very dangerous aspect for society. Distinguished delegates, the fact that antimicrobial resistance is not a regular item in our daily use compared to other environmental and health emergencies doesn't mean it is less of a threat. Just as this African proverb tells us, don't think there are no crocodiles just because the water is calm. Thank you. Yeah.
Merci, Richard.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to distinguished delegates who have provided very pertinent aspects when it concerns this issue of antimicrobial resistance. The answer to Senegal is, this is not new, but it fits within the Libreville Declaration on Environment and Health, but more stress the urgency of the environmental dimension that is not as prominent, especially when it comes to discussing the aspects of antimicrobial resistance. The other aspect from Malawi, yes, it's to also heighten the collaboration which already exists, but to really put environment at the center, since it is acting both as a reservoir of those parasites and making it become really the topical aspect, because it is there, but it is not as prominent as it should be. And to Liberia, yes, it fits into the aspects of the urgency of now increased infections, and at the same time really to also foster more research and understanding of how the patterns of these pathogens and parasites that the environment actually harbors can actually be looked into more. So in a nutshell, it's about heightening the environmental dimension and at the same time ensuring that research and synergies can actually be fostered when it comes to this aspect of antimicrobial resistance. Thank you. Tomorrow in the working groups, but to just give a simple answer to the delegate from Nigeria is health is quite a very broad aspect, and if you are to look at it from a synergistic and holistic perspective, what these paper sets are to discuss is if environment creates the breeding ground for these pathogens, which environmental solution can minimize the space for these pathogens to flourish? And that should be the entry point, but it cannot happen without strengthening partnership with other actors, health, agriculture, and others. And so, like you rightly said, yes, the scope will be determined by EU member states in the discussion tomorrow. But as we said, the key is really to strengthen and showcase the environmental dimension of antimicrobial resistance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think most of the aspects have already been covered, but as we know, this African proverb puts it in perspective, that when it rains, it doesn't rain on one roof. And that's cascades to tell the bigger story of transboundary climate risk. And when we put it within the context of Africa, just to put in perspective today, a continent of 17% of the entire global population, we're contributing only about 4% of global emissions, yet the impacts of the climate change are visible. And that actually showcases the transboundary nature of the changing climate. But one thing that I want to bring out very clearly, and I think speakers already touched on this, is that because of the fact that the continent have a low level of socio-economic transformation, then they are more vulnerable than any other continent. And so this means that we need to have very clear messages, and I have two clear messages. The first one is that climate change calls for a global response, but at the same time, Africa's active participation needs to be very clear, but should be based also on accountability metrics. The second aspect is that you cannot be able to talk about climate adaptation in a continent without reshaping the narrative. Now there is profound power in the narrative, and the narrative here is about socioeconomics. You cannot tell a hungry child that you gave him or her food yesterday. If that child is hungry now, that means nothing, whether you gave him or her food yesterday. It therefore means that the narrative should be about putting food on the table. And as a result of that, I have four aspects from the lessons we've learned from the work that the UN Environment is doing across the continent. And looking at regional bodies, the first thing to do is to support the continent's leadership in accountability. I think Katie did mention we are actually faced with a significant accountability event in the climate process, the global stocktake. It is an opportunity to showcase what is working in Africa. How can Africa strengthen its national communication? How can Africa strengthen to ensure that the long-term low-emission development strategies are updated? How can Africa also ensure that the adaptation work that is working in the continent can actually be made the norm and not the exception? And that data of leveraging on what is working to bring impact to scale rather than duplicating efforts, because the biggest operational risk is duplication of efforts in the continent. That takes me to the second point, which is that of narrative. When you look across the entire African continent today, most of the nationally determined contributions from countries have clean energy and sustainable agriculture. But the difficulty most of the time is that adaptation is discussed as a silo, as a standalone issue, and that have been projected only through the lens of a public good and at the same time a social endeavor. We need to start looking at how do we leverage mitigation to power adaptation. Let's just take a mother who grows a tomato. When you travel across villages across the continent, Africa today, you see tomatoes harvested, maybe grown using organic manure. They're there, but they don't last for long because there are lack of storage facilities, there are lack of value addition. What if we were to leverage solar-powered refrigerators, cool systems to just ensure that we can store that tomato or add value to that tomato? It therefore means that if we don't marry adaptation and mitigation to be able to power socio-economic transformation, we might not be able to actually address the socio-economic challenges that the continent faces today. The third aspect is, if we do not start to see adaptation through the investment lens, we might never really be able to graduate from risk to opportunity, because the narrative is about risk, but in every risk there is an opportunity. And how do you then tap an opportunity in risk? You tap it by making sure that you make adaptation an enterprising endeavor. And how do you make that an enterprising endeavor? The NDCs need to be turned into investment plans, where adaptation NDCs are seen through the lens of creating enterprises and at the same time inspiring the informal sector and the formal sector to close that gap. The fourth aspect is the continent of Africa is a young continent today. And most of the young people, as the previous speaker already mentioned, are leaving the continent because there are a lack of jobs. But how can we tap into the ingenuity by ensuring that we retool their skills so that at least we make adaptation attractive to them by making sure they can start tapping opportunities within the climate action space? For example, just turning simple agricultural waste into organic manure provides an opportunity that will help not only ensure that our soils are intact, but will increase agricultural productivity. That's a huge business for young people. And they do not care whether there is a risk or not. They care about money in their pockets and put on the table. That goes back to the narrative issue that I was mentioning. And the last aspect is you can only compete from a position of strength. Africa's strength is our traditional institutional structures, it's our governance structures, but sometimes we ignore simple cooperatives. Leveraging local traditional governance structure. Through our work in Uganda, we use the Uganda Kingdom, where the king's voice is policy. Adopt ecosystem-based adaptation. Just the king telling 12 million people, leverage agroforestry techniques, leverage conservation techniques, it became law. If we do not leverage traditional institutions that are closer to the people who matter, we'll be missing the point, and that is a very important aspect. Like this African proverb tells us, one cannot build a house for last year's summer. It means we can only build resilient communities by starting to do work today, not waiting for tomorrow because it will be too late. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. But before I go to that, I think I need to answer the question that the young people in here asked, because they are the pillars, I mean, they are the powerhouse, and sometimes we need to provide the right narrative. As I said, there is profound power in the narrative. A wrong narrative falls. A false narrative and a wrong narrative falsifies development. And this is something that is not always spoken most of the time, but I think it is very, very important for us to start speaking these aspects the way they're supposed to be spoken. If not, we might not be able to actually build resilience of communities. Why do I say so? There are a lot of young people across the entire African continent that are doing amazing work. They are carrying our adaptation work but they don't have resources, they are retooling their skills. And we've seen this through a framework we created called innovative volunteerism, where young people are guided, they're inspired, and they're ushering themselves to action. And they're, like I said earlier, turning agricultural waste into organic manure. They're developing soil dryers that are adding value and decentralized to communities to help mothers. The point I am trying to make is that if we do not build on what works, and sometimes speak as if there is nothing working in the continent, it will only dissuade and sometimes project weakness and not strength. So when you project weakness, you inspire. And when you inspire more people, they will come into action, and that action will be brought to scale. But when you project weakness, you dissuade and discourage. And when you discourage people, they do not actually usher themselves. Because the biggest currency we keep talking about, finance is important, don't get me wrong. But if you throw money on passionless people, nothing will happen. Passion is the biggest currency of now. And if we do not inspire our young people to become passionate, we might not be able to drive transformational adaptation. That takes me now to the point where Olumide mentioned that they need to take power by force. Nothing is given for free to anyone anywhere in the world. You have to build value, and value attracts value. If you get something free of charge, that's the same way it will go. And what does that mean? You must be part of the process. Nobody will invite you to the table, create your own table, and people will come to that table to meet you. Then on the part of adaptation, actually we've been working across the continent. When I started off, I said we have NDCs, 98% ratified in the continent, but we do not have investment plans. That means that this NDC is not having investment. 72% of NDCs in the entire African continent have not been turned into investment plans. How do we attract investment? So what we're doing, for example, in Ghana, where within the NDCs, they have e-mobility and they have climate smart agriculture. So what we've done with the country is working with them to actually showcase how do you ensure that at least e-buses are actually connected to where farms are utilizing climate smart agricultural approaches to then connect them to markets. That way, we are linking mitigation with adaptation, and the government is coming in to put places charging for e-buses, for e-mobility, so that at least investments can come in, and then they're also developing an e-mobility policy in the country to create an enabling environment. That this must be connecting farms to markets, so that at least we will have investment, and then training youth, local mechanics, so that at least they can be versed with how to deal with these e-buses. When you do not marry adaptation and mitigation together, and I will go back to this point, we will be speaking in silos, and that is not going to build transformational resilience for the continent. And I think the last part is what Kwame said, which I would like to bring to add to what he eloquently presented here. The reality is this: if I started by saying if you tell a hungry child that you gave him or her food yesterday, that means nothing to that child because he or she is hungry. If you give early warning to the community that do not have money to be able to relocate to elsewhere, how will they do that? We've seen hurricanes around the world. We've seen hurricanes in the United States. But we've also seen cyclones in Africa, Cyclone Idai, that hit southern African region. People do not move to elsewhere because they don't have money in their pockets. So the biggest thing to do is to ensure that socio-economic viability of communities are up to there. And that means putting more money in more pockets and food on the table. So that at least when they have early warning, they can move elsewhere. If you give the information and they cannot be able to move, that means nothing. So we must be able to focus on this one word, socio-economics. Thank you. To be part of this discussion, which is quite very timely, on this integrated assessment of air pollution, climate change, for sustainable development in the African continent. This conversation couldn't have been more timely, and I would like to start off with a proverb that says, if you close your eyes to facts, you will learn through accidents. The global film industry is an example that I would like to use to contextualize the reality we face today. The global film industry generates an estimated $100 billion, 5 times more than what Africa has received when it comes to climate finance. Among the most captivating things that we see in these movies are those that project doomsday scenario of people breathing and dying from mysterious poisons. Unfortunately, what most of us what I see in movies is the dreadful reality of about 1.2 million people who die prematurely every year across the African continent for doing what they must do to sustain their lives. Breathing. Air pollution is Africa's second largest cause of death, with an economic cost estimated at over 400 billion yearly in the continent today. And what is even worse is that air pollution is linked to yet another costly risk, climate change, by virtue of sharing the same drivers, rising emissions. As we speak today, Africa is warming faster, twice as fast as the rest of the world, bearing a brunt of the changing climate, despite the fact that it contributes only about 4% to the emissions. And so our discussion today, looking at air pollution and climate change and how it can pave the way for sustainable development when actions are taken, are realistic and more urgent than we can ever think. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this scary reality that I've painted is why the report set to be launched at this 18th AMSI session, titled An Integrated Assessment of Air Pollution and Climate Change for Sustainable Development in Africa, is extremely very important. It is important because it provides a groundbreaking targeted approach based on addressing 37 measures to see Africa simultaneously address climate change and air pollution in one clean sweep while unlocking multiple opportunities. The report targets actions in 6 key sectors, including power generation, industry, agriculture, transport, waste, household, domestic energy, as critical to addressing climate change and pollution. But what is most encouraging, as you're going to hear in presentations by the panelists, is that this report notes there are already pockets of successes that need to be expanded. But what I want to leave you with is 5 points. As you follow these pointers to understand how the aspect that you hear today can also be expanded and incentivized to do so. The first is attractive narrative for investments. Attractive implementation investments calls for a clear demonstration of financial and economic returns on investment for those who devise solutions. Scaling up the solutions that are already working calls for clear investment plans that demonstrate clear financial dividends for implementers. And in a continent like Africa today, where we have most of the jobs created in the informal sector engages over 80% of Africans, and therefore the discussion on these aspects of air pollution and climate change cannot forget this very, very important constituency. The second aspect that we need to take into consideration as a pointer to incentivize expansion of the outcomes of this report is youth skills retooling. In a continent today, we have over 60% of the entire population youthful. This 60% is a constituency we must tap into their strengths. And their strengths are not a given. We must be able to help guide young people to retool their skills. They will need to be supported to adapt their skills to become solution providers, especially in new capital-intensive area. When you walk across the entire African continent today, we see waste litter, especially the cultural waste. It's an opportunity that youth can actually be guided to start learning how to turn agricultural waste into fuel briquettes that are cheaper than charcoal, and this is an area that can unlock over $20 billion that is currently expended in charcoal, and provide affordable, accessible, clean cooking alternatives to the over 70% of Africans who use on clean cooking. The third aspect is policy is the biggest driver of change. And the reality is that targeted policy incentives, especially physical incentives, favorable fiscal policies, they do play a significant role. And this is critical to attracting markets to the new solutions that are about emissions. For example, to minimize risk of charcoal and biomass and unlock opportunities, countries across the continent, for example, Kenya, did incentivize clean cooking through the Finance Act of 2021, where legislation exempted 3 classes of clean cooking from 16% VAT, including sustainable fuel briquettes. The fourth aspect is non-policy incentives. And I keep saying this, and I will say it again. If we do not inspire people to see opportunities in challenges, we might not be able to bring impact to scale. What I mean here is policy incentives are important, but regardless of how timely they may be, will accomplish very little if we do not inspire people to leverage on passion, to see opportunities in waste, to see opportunities in air pollution and the changing climate. And that's what we must do, especially with our young people. The last aspect is data for policy. Data is very, very important. Data of proven successes across the continent at the ground level towards informing targeted policies is very, very important. And this active feedback loop of data that you're going to see, for example, in the report that will be launched tomorrow, and examples of what has been empirically put into work as feedback to inform policy needs to be prioritized for all areas to inform policy. And let me end with the African proverb that a single president does not jingle. We need everyone on board to be able to drive solutions that minimize air pollution, but at the same time tap opportunities to create jobs. Only then can we be able to ensure that we can bring impact to scale. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Which path is best for Africa, but it informs and facilitates discussions on this particular topic. Next. Next slide. Just scroll through all the messages because we don't have much time, but we have some key messages that have emerged from this. Number one is that air pollution and climate change cannot be, they are closely linked and we cannot handle the two issues separately. That has been a practice that we find that climate change demonstrations are going on and discussions on climate change are going on, and yet air pollution as a driver of climate change is again handled separately. The innovative nature of this assessment was that we are bringing these two issues together. And we are saying that by investing in the solutions to fight climate change and air pollution together, Africa has the opportunity to building on progress that she has already made in recent decades. We can achieve multiple benefits. Next. Now, the measures which we are proposing, 37 of them, we are glad to report that they have, many of them are related and they are actually being implemented. We are able to generate social benefits in the environment sector, social, economic benefits, gender, across ages, across different socioeconomic groups. We have shown that there will be tremendous improvement on health, increased crop yields. You know that in Africa we are still an agrarian continent, and therefore food production, food and nutrition security are very, very important. A hungry population cannot be a productive population. Next. I think I've already mentioned that these are already being implemented. You just scroll through. Just move on. This is where I like controlling the movement of slides by myself. Now I feel very handicapped. Now let me highlight the 3 recommendations that we have from the assessment. Number one is that it's important that we develop a continental program on air quality management. And we are labeling this the Africa Clean Air Program. This program should be anchored go back, because I need to emphasize the 3 recommendations. The program should be anchored across the continent and across being handled by different stakeholders. The other recommendation we are saying is that by catalyzing and supporting the development and implementation of this continental and practical program for sustainable transport, energy generation, and the youth, industry, agriculture, and those sectors, Africa will have moved on to a better development trajectory. Finally, we are saying that development of an Africa Trans-Viral Convention for the prevention and management of air pollution, given that it is a common problem, is something that Africa should have in place. And we feel that the development of the convention is already what happens in each of the sectors. I think we have the opportunity to read them. We just scroll through. We have what should be done on the energy production and consumption sector, the transport, agriculture, and waste. We go to the end. I think that is the transport sector and what will happen. We are coming to systems in buses, clean energy for the transport sector. Is so future African where the firewood and cattle and down. We need to encourage innovations that will make the transition to clean energy. A mother and a child should not cry while cooking food for the family because the kitchen is too smoky. Okay, thank you. Next. In the other sectors, the energy production sector, of course, we're promoting solar, and I think solar is now becoming more common, the costs are also coming down. But I always say, let us look solar in the complete project and asset management cycle. Don't look into it, it is an answer. Let's think about that next. One of our key findings is that a lot of emissions, particularly on methane, comes from the agriculture sector, in the rice production system, and also in the management.
A lot of your posts, when I go through them, I number one, when you have good network, money won't drive you, to be honest. In fact, in fact, to divine wealthy people, to know how wealthy someone is the network the person has. Beyond money, you have really shown us that it is good to be committed to whatever we do as young people. And of course, in the environment space, you have really inspired a lot of us. You have really inspired me.
Thank you.
You said everything.
Yeah.
You when reading your post, and when I started my internship,
yeah.
they told me that you will have your welcome entry meeting.
Right.
I was like, okay, and I saw Dr. Richard, and I was like, maybe I think that I've already seen this name, but I wasn't sure. And the day of the meeting come, and I saw when we put the video, I saw Dr. Richard. This was a very big surprise. And after I sent you a message, to tell you, but I was very happy because for me you are a real model, for me, and I really want to look like. Yes, and my expectation, I was just that I really want to be like a specialist, to master the topics as you, and as I've already begun as a small level. I want really to inspire also young people, because I know that in my country many young people who are interested in the environmental challenges.
I will come there.
Yeah, they take me as an example.
Excellent.
But I think that this is at a small level. I'm not at your level, and I really want
You will
to
reach there.
Yeah, to reach your level. Yeah, this
Excellent.
is my experience.
So I struggled like all of you, which is a good thing. So the second aspect is that if you really want to make a change in anyone's life, it's not the people who already have, it is those who don't have. Because the little you bring to them, whether it is ideas, knowledge, or just make that person to see that it's possible, he or she will never forget. And that's what sometimes we miss, especially when we're in big organizations. Because when we come to these meetings, most of the people who come to this meeting somehow have a connection. When I say connection, they either work in an institution or they know someone somewhere who must have
then invited them through an institution. That's okay. But there are people back there in our different countries who will never have an opportunity to have access to you or to have access to me. So that's the second. So the third, why I actually call you guys to engage with is that, so it's my attitude. So my attitude is, if I go anywhere and don't engage people who are yearning to be somewhere tomorrow, because one of the biggest attributes that especially us in Africa means is when we reach a certain stage. When I say we, I'm not talking us here, but I'm talking generally how our continent is structured. We're very classy. When we say classy in terms of class, we tend to associate only with people at our level. And that creates a disparity and causes some kind of disconnection with reality. So we operate in a bubble. So what I've always hoped and believed in, regardless of whether I am working where I'm working or I go back to my village in Cameroon, my local village, is always to make somebody to see himself better than me. And how do you see yourself better than me is because I never had the opportunities you have today. It means that if I'm something today, you can be better than me tomorrow, and that's the truth. So all I'm trying to say is your dreams are valid, right? And your future is bright. That's a fact. But what you need to do, you need to build on the opportunity. So one of the things that you guys already are doing is that you all belong somewhere. Whether it is you who created where you belong or you are working in an institution created by someone else, that's already a big plus. And that then means you need to use that space to create one word, value. And what is value? Value is not something that is that big. It's first of all something you do that is not about you, but it's about someone else. And that someone else is a person who doesn't have an opportunity. So you said you're working with energy and with real women. The real women don't have an opportunity to access clean energy. So if they can just get clean energy, whether it is burgers or it's a clean cook stove or it's briquette, it's touching a life. It's not about it. Yes, you're passionate about it, but at the end of the day, you're benefiting somebody. That's how value is created. And you are fulfilled, and that person is fulfilled. And then you are blessed. You are working with young people, with waves and all that. All those things you do, use your energy, you benefit different people. Yes, but you build value because that's how you build your name. And you are working, you have an NGO, dealing with environment, you are touching different people's lives. So the point I'm trying to make is that the reason why I wanted to engage with you guys was don't ever underestimate what you do. Never ever underestimate what you do. If you notice my story today, it's always around the little things I did when I was growing up. It's not necessarily what I do now. Because that was the foundation. And a house that is built on a solid foundation will withstand the storms and the wind. I don't know, I would like to repeat that again. A house that is built on and a solid foundation is what you do now before you get exposed out there. Because when you get exposed out there, what will make you stronger is what you did that time when you had no opportunities for many things. And that is what made me today. So if you see me there's one thing that you guys didn't say, but it's something that I could say is my strength. I am very vocal. And it comes with risk. So if you want to make a difference, you don't need to be afraid, but you don't need to be careless. These are two things. Not being afraid doesn't mean you should be careless. And that value, anybody you engage from that perspective. So you are dealing with women and clean energy. So if you introduce yourself to people who said, this is what I do, this is the kind of thing I do, what did you do? You have a conversation. Because the person wants to do more. But if you see somebody and say, oh, I come from a very poor home, everybody has adversity, has troubles, or has problems one way, you disassociate yourself. So what I wanted to tell you guys today was just this. So the point is that project your strengths, not your weaknesses. And strengths win. Weaknesses makes you lose. And strength should be about value. And value is what you create. And that value, when you create it earlier, it sustains you throughout. I'll stop here. You can ask me questions.
Being fearless at all. But not being careless, I'm trying to ask myself, I hope you have not been careless somewhere. As I was thinking about that, what you said also made sense again. You said the mistake you made is really not a mistake until it is repeated again.
It's experience.
So what I've just learned now is being fearless, being bold. I'm going to make very conscious effort to marry it with not being careless.
Wow, you summarize it so nicely and beautiful.
Part of what you said is the fact that we should never underestimate what we do, and looking at some of the actions that maybe particularly me that I've been doing, that some things I would just see it as maybe this is little, it is not reaching a larger community. Sometimes one might tend to be discouraged that okay, I'm not getting the necessary support, the necessary skills. But then with what we have said, it has really motivated me. In Nigeria they call it ginger.
Ginger, I don't ginger you.
Yeah.
But you know they talk pidgin English.
Yeah.
Well.
I was so surprised. I said, what's your name?
So I don't get the ginger. So you understand?
That is you don't get the ginger.
So whatever I'm doing now, I know that no effort is little, and I'll continue to push as long as I'm affecting life and I'm breaking ground. So thank you.
Very difficult to talk
Yeah,
after
to
you
talk
see
after
what you-
you-
because you
yeah.
almost said anything. But what I will keep in mind in what you said, among what you said, it's to focus on creating value, and also to try to. So I noted in French, "Entourez-vous des meilleurs," like
Yeah,
surround you with the best people. And concerning the first point, focus on creating value. I think that this talked to me a lot because I know as young people we are sometimes like disturbed by the fact that we live in a society where
The bubble, yeah. Things
bubble
move so quickly.
and yes, and also the fact that
And pressure.
pressure to make money, and this make me remember of some troubles I got with my parents because I was really focused on the environmental area, and my father wanted me to start
medical
working,
doctor.
make something, and he wanted to find me a job. Like it was like, and I was like, no, I don't like this. This is what I like. This is what I want to do. And when I see all that I'm maybe it doesn't see what I'm creating, but I can feel it. I can see it, and I keep believing yes in what I'm doing.
Wow. So I struggled like all of it, which is a good thing. So the second aspect is that if you really want to make a change in anyone's life, it's not the people who already have, it is those who don't have. Because the little you bring to them, whether it is ideas, knowledge, or just make that person to see that it's possible, he or she will never forget. And that's what sometimes we miss, especially when we're in big organizations. Because when we come to these meetings, most of the people who come to this meeting somehow have a connection. When I say connection, they either work in an institution or they know someone somewhere who must have then invited them through an institution. That's okay. But there are people back there in our different countries who will never have an opportunity to have access to you or to have access to you. So that's the second. So the third, why I actually call you guys to engage with is that, so it's my attitude. So my attitude is If I go anywhere and don't engage people who are yearning to be somewhere tomorrow, because one of the biggest attributes that especially us in Africa miss is when we reach a certain stage. When I say we, I'm not talking us here, but I'm talking in general how our continent is structured. We're very classy. When we say classy in terms of class, we tend to associate only with people at our level. And that creates a disparity and causes some kind of disconnection with reality. So we operate in a bubble. So what I've always hoped and believed in, regardless of whether I am working where I'm working or I go back to my village in Cameroon, my local village, is always to make somebody to see himself better than me. And how do you see yourself better than me is because I never had the opportunities you have today. It means that if I'm something today, you can be better than me tomorrow. And that's the truth. So all I'm trying to say is your dreams are valid, right? And your future is bright. That's a fact. But what you need to do, you need to build on the opportunity. So one of the things that you guys already are doing is that you all belong somewhere. Whether it is you who created where you belong, or you are working in an institution created by someone else, that's already a big plus. And that then means you need to use that space to create one word, value. And what is value? Value is not something that is that big. It's first of all something you do that is not about you, but it's about someone else. And that someone else is a person who doesn't have an opportunity. So you said you're working with energy and with real women. The real women don't have an opportunity to access clean energy. So if they can just get clean energy, whether it is biogas or it's a clean cook stove or it's briquette, it's touching a life. It's not about it. Yes, you're passionate about it, but at the end of the day, you're benefiting somebody. That's how value is created. And you are fulfilled, and that person is fulfilled. And then you are blessed. You are working with young people, with waves and all that. All those things you do, use your energy, you benefit different people. Yes, but you build value because that's how you build your name. And you are working, you have an NGO, dealing with environment, you are touching different people's lives. So the point I'm trying to make is that the reason why I wanted to engage with you guys was don't ever underestimate what you do. Never ever underestimate what you do. If you notice my story today, it's always around the little things I did when I was growing up. It's not necessarily what I do now. Because that was the foundation. And a house that is built on a solid foundation will withstand the storms and the wind. I don't know, I would like to repeat that again. A house that is built on and a solid foundation is what you do now before you get exposed out there. Because when you get exposed out there, what will make you stronger is what you did that time when you had no opportunities for many things. And that is what made me today. So if you see me there's one thing that you guys didn't say, but it's something that I could say is my strength. I'm very vocal. And it comes with risk. So if you want to make a difference, you don't need to be afraid, but you don't need to be careless. These are two things. Not being afraid doesn't mean you do a story. If you listen to me very carefully, I'm a very good storyteller. And it must be about what you have done and what you've been part of. If it was a tree you planted, don't be shy to tell that story. This community never had water. We mobilized them, we planted this, today they have water. We are proud. In my village, they say it takes a village to raise a child. That shows partnerships, that shows selflessness. Whether people like what you say or not, it should not, that's where fearlessness comes in. Be bold enough to tell your story and be proud of your roots. If you are from Cote d'Ivoire or Cameroon, be proud of your country and never shy away from telling your story because you think that they will see you as inferior. No, your strength is the difference you bring, and that uniqueness is always about that authenticity that comes from you telling a story about what you know best and use your strength. Use your strength. Don't imitate. Don't imitate. Frame your narrative because it makes you authentic. Don't imitate. The other aspect is what brings money never starts with money. It's value. Value attracts money. And people come to you because they know you can offer value. And never ever start any discussion from the perspective of I don't have. No. You have. You're alive, my friend. You have knowledge. Share the ideas. Share the ideas. And the last aspect is I will repeat what I said earlier. Don't be afraid to fail, but learn from the mistakes. Learn from the mistakes and move forward. And don't be afraid to drop bad friends. Anybody who discourages you is a bad person. Not bad in the sense that it's bad from the perspective that he's draining your energy. Drop the person. Because when you succeed in whatever thing you do, the very people want to associate with you. That's okay. Value attracts. Thank you.
Que l'Afrique n'est pas venue à Rotterdam tendre la main. Il faudrait que l'on reconnaisse la responsabilité commune mais différenciée sur ce qui se passe aujourd'hui au niveau de la planète. Ceux qui ont pollué plus doivent mettre la main à la poche. Il ne faut pas qu'on considère ces fonds comme des aides au développement. C'est vraiment de cela qu'il s'agit. La dernière question, c'est la question 6. Elle a une relation étroite avec bien sûr le continent africain parce que cette question a été abordée lors de la COP, comme je le disais tout à l'heure, la COP de Glasgow. Nous avons été extrêmement surpris lors des négociations les pays développés et les pays en développement n'acceptent pas de reconnaître les besoins spécifiques de l'Afrique. C'est la question liée à la reconnaissance des besoins spécifiques de l'Afrique. Cela doit être acté dans les textes d'application de l'accord de Paris, comme il stipule très clairement, comme il a été stipulé très clairement dans la convention qui nous régit. Ce n'est pas une demande supplémentaire de trop, c'est une justice que nous réclamons parce que cela est bien prévu dans les textes de la convention. Malheureusement, à Glasgow, malgré les rencontres que nous avons eues, nous n'avons pas pu régler cette question de manière définitive et nous espérons que lors de cette COP qui aura lieu en terre africaine, que la justice soit rendue à l'Afrique pour que cette disposition soit prise en charge dans les textes d'application de l'accord de Paris. maa ngi leen di sant maa ngi leen di gërëm damay tàmbali par
of environment from Ghana and Burkina Faso, representative of the European Union who graciously supported the Switch Africa Green program that is our host today, all protocols observed. On behalf of the United Nations Environment Program, I would like to thank the panelists for honoring the invitation to speak during this site event that is so timely, with title Enhancing Sustainability Through Circularity. In addition, we thank the European Union for their continued support of the Switch Africa Green program. Excellencies, an African proverb tells us that one cannot both feast and become rich. This African proverb simply analogizes circularity and resource efficiency. It's about creating wealth through eliminating waste and inefficiencies, from agriculture to waste, including plastics to energy to cooling, among others. All these presents opportunities for the entire African continent to create a merit of socio-economic opportunities, while at the same time enhancing the environment to unlock multiple sustainable development goals, as well as implement the Paris Climate Change Agreement, among other multilateral agreements. And this is the basis of competitive green manufacturing enterprises that Africa urgently needs today. Your Excellency, the examples across the continent today, from municipal waste to electricity, from reducing inefficiencies in the entire agro-value chain, are testament to the fact that circularity is an opportunity. Circularity in plastics can create up to about $8 billion in enterprise opportunities, including for the informal sector, including creating opportunities for young people. Excellencies, these examples dotted across the entire African continent, examples of opportunity that Africa stands to gain from circularity and resource efficiency investments, a testament to the fact that this is our own fierce urgency of now. Cumulatively, tapping such pathways to drive COVID-19 recovery efforts is estimated can generate up to 420% better returns in gross value added and up to 250% better returns in job creation. What is more encouraging is the rise of green financing instruments globally, for which Africa has a lot of room for growth. For example, while the global green bonds trade to reach over $1.1 trillion in 2021 and is projected to surpass $1.5 trillion in 2022, Africa represents less than 1%. Excellencies, it is in tapping these opportunities that we have converged here today, and I thank all of you for your participation. This site event is designed to stimulate discussions on how best African countries can integrate circular economy in their development processes and build on what is already underway. In Africa, the United Nations Environment Programme is promoting circular economy through a number of initiatives, including using circularity in sustainable consumption and production to divert waste in countries, sustainable, healthy and inclusive food systems, transformation, innovative business practices and economic models in the textile value chain funded by the European Union, and green business development through Switch Africa Green Program, among others. Notably, Excellencies, the Switch Africa Green Program is developing guidelines for accelerating the transition towards a circular economy in the African continent, undertaking an assessment of greening financing mechanisms for micro, small and medium enterprises in Africa. The guidelines will enhance ongoing efforts to promote the region's green business and circular economy. For example, the guidelines will inform the development of national action plans on the circular economy, the African Union Commission regional strategy and action plan on circular economy in the continent as well. It will also enhance the regional activity on circular economy in the continent, as well as ensure that alliance with Africa's circular economy, as well as the African Development Bank. The green financing assessment will provide an up-to-date and broadened understanding of the financial instruments, models and policies, tools available, and the access to micro, small and medium enterprises for green financing. This work, Your Excellencies, will support the implementation of various commitments and resolutions, including 17 AMSN that identifies circular economy as one of the action areas to promote environmental sustainability in the African continent and to ensure prosperity in the continent. And this dovetails into the United Nations Environment Assembly Resolution 5.2 on enhancing circular economy as a contribution to achieving sustainable consumption and production. Your Excellency, just as we know that a friend is someone who shares the path with, I would like to acknowledge the efforts by various governments across the continent, the support provided by development partners, the innovation from the private sector, and financing institutions in supporting and promoting the circular economy across the African continent. The journey to low carbon, resource efficient, environmentally sustainable and socio-economically competitive economies in Africa is long, and we need the collaboration and partnerships of everyone. Therefore, let all of us during this discussion in the next 1 hour carry on with this momentum, ensuring we can create linkages, strengthen capacity, and support strong partnerships to accelerate the transition to a circular economy in Africa. I look forward to the discussions from this meeting and the recommendations that will drive the circular economy agenda in the region, because we know that a single president cannot jingle. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
If it's managed properly. And that is why at the Champions we're working very closely with very key partners, including the COP27 presidency, government of Egypt, and many others in developing and hopefully launching at COP27 a multi-stakeholder partnership on phasing out open waste burning.
Your predecessors proved their friendship for one another with an agenda of providing advocacy to environmental protection. In Africa, that is shared an agenda to ensure that basic human needs are met adequately and in a sustainable manner. This agenda provides a foundation for foundation of many decisions and declarations that are at various stages of implementation today. Strengthening such implementation actions is the commitment, precise, and the logic behind this high-level ministerial session discussion. This session, Your Excellencies, the Council's role in strengthening the implementation action of important decisions and actions and collaboration with key government and external institutions to promote harmonized this short intervention, Chair, while you are waiting between 35% to 60% less consuming electricity and fossil fuel power plants, circularity in plastic can create up to 8 billion in new capacity, including for the informal sector, through actions like making plastic cards. This session, Your Excellencies, will discuss the policy interventions and processes that can unlock this dichotomy of solving an environmental challenge in a manner that will unlock socio-economic opportunities. And we explore the following issues: policy interventions that AMSI can undertake to actualize an effective waste management system in the African continent. This session will also explore the role of national and regional frameworks in waste management, including waste prevention and incentivizing circularity. It will look at partnerships with financial resources that are needed to develop institutional and physical infrastructure of efficient and integrated waste management systems. And lastly, Your Excellencies, to look at how Africa can safeguard its priorities in negotiating the legally binding instrument on plastic pollution. I will now, Mr. President, hand over to the chair of the session to start the discussion. Thank you. In plastic management, let me start off with an African product, Excellencies, that the eye never forgets what the heart has seen. The negative impacts of pollution, especially plastic pollution and open waste burning, are best perceived from the heart. Just imagine up to 90% of waste in Africa is extremated uncontrollably, done and often burned. The open burning accounts for up to 29% of fine particulate pollution of Africa's air, and together with other air pollutants lead to over 1.2
15 million premature deaths yearly. Just one person dying prematurely because of disposal and waste burning is one too many. At this time, as we speak today, Excellencies, we are seeing out of 19 million tons of plastic waste generated annually in the entire African continent, and up to 17 million tons are mismanaged. And if this business as usual scenario continues, the plastic managed in the African continent is projected to triple by 2060. Mismanagement of plastics is causing an expansion of exposure of plastics in critical areas of the environment and food chain, resulting in serious health problems. Excellencies, at the same time, efforts to combat these wastes in an environmental sustainable manner obtains a myriad of opportunities. For example, waste recovery with electricity techniques can be applied to minimize the often burning of waste, while generating between 35% to 60% less polluting electricity than fossil fuel power plants. Circularity in plastic can create up to 8 billion in new opportunities, including for the informal sector, through actions like making plastic cards. This session, Your Excellencies, will discuss the policy interventions and processes that can unlock this dichotomy of solving an environmental challenge in a manner that will unlock socio-economic opportunities. And will explore the following issues: policy interventions that AMSI can undertake to actualize an effective waste management system in the entire African continent. This session will also explore the role of national and regional frameworks in waste management, including waste prevention and incentivizing